Let's get into the Senate lockdown today because all of this is centered around clarity. Of course, last week was huge today, and this week could be even bigger. You've probably heard me mention Uphold before, and there's a reason I keep talking about them. Uphold makes it incredibly easy to bridge the gap between your portfolio and the real world. This has not been done before. Their Uphold debit card is the best example of that. It lets you spend your crypto or your cash anywhere Visa is accepted, all while earning 4% back in XRP on every purchase. It's the easiest way to stack rewards on your daily spending. Download the Uphold app for more and get started. The first thing I want to do is lead off with a clip from Mike Novagratz, and then we'll bring in our guest. Take a look.
I think the Clarity Act is going to pass. I do. And I know right now it doesn't feel like it at all. You just need a small compromise on ethics. And I think that ethics compromise is going to look like what they did with Lake and Riley, where they said the state AGs can't sue congressmen or the president, but they can sue the DOJ if they don't think the law is being applied appropriately. And that will be enough, I think, to get both sides to say that's a tough enough ethics bill. Let's pass this thing.
All right, so ethics has been kind of the holdup for quite some time, and we've had several analysts on. I wanted to bring on Summer Mersinger, who is, of course, the CEO over at the Blockchain Association. Summer, welcome into the show. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me this afternoon.
So you are absolutely very busy this week.
Yes.
And a lot is happening. When you look at the current situation as it is right now with the Senate, the combined bill, of course, now we see all sorts of new copy and new text. First of all, what was your initial take on where the Clarity Act stands as it is right now?
I think it's in a great spot. It's right where we want it to be to get Senate consideration and honestly passage as well. I think that the players are in the room making they're negotiating, they're making the decisions that need to be made to get this across the finish line. So we're in striking distance, and I think we will see this get done and out of the Senate very soon.
All right, so within striking distance, because the scenario and the concern that has been mostly within the industry has been able to get to that 60 votes. And there's been a handful of senators that have seemed to kind of maybe cross the line here. Is there anybody specific that we should be watching for that could signal that this is a go from the Senate side?
Yeah, absolutely. Senator Cory Booker is someone to watch. He's been very involved on the Democrat side, especially with the agriculture text. Senator Ruben Gallego, Senators Angela Alsobrooks, again, very involved, working very hard on a number of negotiations, and are people who've said they'd like to get to yes on this. They'd like to be able to support this. So keep an eye on those senators.
All right, Summer, so we are setting at 10 days right now, 5 hours, okay? You tell me, can this be done in 10 days?
Certainly can get past the Senate. It does get a little tricky because the House went out of session, and this bill does need to go back to the House of Representatives because the Senate made changes. So we'll have to just keep pushing through the Congress's August recess and get the House to take up the Senate passed bill as soon as they get back. But I have no doubt we can get this through the Senate the next couple of days, or at least in the week, and kind of tee it up for the House when they return.
Okay, so you have President Trump pushing hard to get Senate to stay in session to try to get this done. You had Rick Scott, he's our senator out there pushing. He's obviously talking about Mike Lee. I will vote to stay in session unless we have passed the Save America thing, but this also could line up in a position where it could affect clarity as well in terms of the Senate being available there. Is that doable in D.C.? Is this something that you have seen happen in D.C. before?
I've seen congressional recesses canceled before. That is certainly something that has happened, especially when there are must-pass pieces of legislation that need to get done. Sometimes when you put that kind of pressure on the senators, it's what gets them to the table to kind of finalize negotiations so that you can get the 60 votes. I do think clarity is a little different than SAVE. I think that we're able to pick up a number of Democrats once we get some of these last-minute negotiations nailed down. And I think it's a lot easier to get to 60 votes, but I know SAVE is very important to the president. So, we'll be watching that as well. But I feel very good about Clarity kind of beating the clock here.
Interesting. Okay, so one of the guys that has been on our show before, securities lawyer, and of course that's James over at Meta Lawman. You guys can follow him out there on Twitter. He kind of hits it right here, and is that Trump does have the legal authority to cancel the Senate recess. And this, of course, would get things rolling for both potentially the Save America Act, but primarily what we're interested in is the Clarity Act, with getting to that 60 votes. And I think if the fact that it can be done, and what you're saying is that you've seen it done before, that's a good possibility. Here, paint out the next few steps. Let's assume that we do get Clarity passed. The Senate comes together, we get this done. Does it have to go back to the House to get a rubber stamp? What's the process at that point?
Yeah, it definitely has to go back to the House. I certainly wouldn't say it's a rubber stamp because this language has changed significantly from what the House sent over. So there will be, additional education and efforts to make sure that the House is comfortable with this bill so they can get it passed. And then once the House passes the Senate version, it goes straight to the president's desk.
Okay.
The Senate used the House bill number, and that allows them to change the text, put in the Senate text, and send it back over to the House for one vote versus having a conference committee between two bills.
Okay, so we saw obviously both the Senate Banking and the Agriculture Committee versions were put together. This also included the ethics provisions, which is really the biggest concession coming out of the White House so far. But this is something that I'm not aware of, and that is the motion to proceed is expected today or tomorrow with the possibility of a floor vote this week. What is this motion to proceed? Is that just something saying, hey, yeah, it goes to the floor?
Yeah, it's a kind of procedural piece of the puzzle that you have to do to get legislation pending on the floor. Mm-hmm. So we're expecting the majority leader to make a motion to proceed. That is generally subject to cloture. It is a debatable procedural vote, so usually they will file cloture, and then that usually sets up a vote in a couple of days. There are some interesting kind of different circumstances this week with the funeral arrangements for former Senator Lindsey Graham, but we do think they still can get to clarity this week.
Okay, so getting clarity this week, you look at the potential over on Polymarket. Right now it's on flatline and has been holding there for most of the day, and yesterday, of course, over the weekend, but holding at 38%. This seems very low versus what I'm hearing from many of the people who have been on our show over the last week, and including yourself, that the likelihood feels, or at least, am I reading this wrong, that you feel like we have a much better likelihood than this 38%?
Yeah, I think that those who, are really familiar with the procedures, how these efforts come together, kind of the interaction of staff and senators that lead up to a major agreement and major legislation getting done, all that's in place. We're seeing it, we're feeling it. And I think it's really hard to know that from the outside. There's a lot going on that you don't see. You see the public press releases where, Democrats are slamming the language and saying the ethics deal isn't good enough. But that's just kind of a negotiation tactic. Behind the scenes, they are actually working together, trying to get to a good place on language. And I really do think there are a number of Democrat senators who do want to get to yes.
Summer, as you probably have seen on our channel, I'm always skeptical, optimistically skeptical, because I have seen so many very interesting and strategic moves out of our opponent, I feel like, for the industry, and that has to be the banks. I look at that, and you consider that we've had support now from all the police associations. That, of course, has started to shift, so law enforcement now starting to look like, hey, no, we support this, there's a way to use this as a benefit. Banks are very quiet. Are you anticipating anything unusual last minute coming in from the banks?
So they're quiet publicly, but we're seeing a lot of behind the scenes activity. There's a lot of kind of myth versus fact sheets out there, talking points that we're getting a hold of from the banks. And so they are working their talking points. They are going in and meeting with senators. They are having their community banks call in. The good news is those talking points are very easy for us to counter. They tend to be kind of half-truths or at least misinformed. And we're able to go in kind of in behind the banks and really help educate the lawmakers and their staff as to what this bill really does do. I think the other piece of this is interesting is with the yield debate and kind of those negotiations. Right. Honestly, the banks lost some credibility. There was a lot was given up by crypto on the yield deal. We were all at the table. We were there in good faith. And to have the banks at the last minute pull out of those negotiations really, I think, left a bad taste in a number of offices, just because of how hard they had worked to get to an agreement.
Well, and I mean, let's be clear. You've got a lot of banks and institutions that have really come in support of this. BlackRock, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Goldman is in, Grayscale, of course. These are all mostly institutional layers that have already started to implement a lot of blockchain technology. So rightly so, they are kind of going in that direction. Do you think it's that the banks are still feeling that they are just further behind for this industry and they weren't quite ready for this advancement in tech?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the case here. This bill is going to benefit banks and crypto industry equally. This is going to give the banks a lot of opportunity to, access new technology, to implement faster movement of money into the system. I expect most of the large banks to actually, be in this industry, be in crypto fully, supportive of it. I just think that they're maybe a little bit behind technologically, and some of this is a effort to kind of slow down the progress. But I think at the end of the day, this bill is going to benefit them as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of those who it could benefit, I want to play a clip for you because it's really kind of boiling down to two sectors in the banking industry. Let me play this clip.
A monopoly is a good thing if you own the monopoly. So I always worked for very large banks, and JP Morgan Chase being the largest, what's called the community banks, the smaller banks. And they often were on the opposite side of the large banks, but they have tremendous political clout. It's who the congressman or the senator has lunch with. They belong to the same country club. They play golf together. It's very tough to go up against the community banks. And I think the community banks are even more vocal against some of this legislation than the large banks.
Interesting. All right, so that's intriguing to that. But do you agree with that analyst there in terms of kind of the framework of what the banks are looking at?
Yeah, I mean, historically, the small community banks have had a lot of political capital on Capitol Hill. Exactly what he said. They're neighbors, they're friends of these senators. They've been meeting with them for years and years, and so they have a good relationship. I think what's different this time is that their arguments don't add up. So this idea that somehow stable coins are going to cause, deposit flights from community bank is absurd. I grew up in a small town. My dad banks at a community bank. He's a farmer. He would never move his money from the community bank to stable coins. He can't. He has all his operating loans there, his home mortgage, everything's at that community bank. So those are different customers than who you see buying into stable coins. So this idea of deposit flight, really, there's no proof of it. And I think that's realized on Capitol Hill.
Well, and you also looked at the most recent numbers coming in from banks where we were seeing deposit increases. I think it was 7% across some of the bigger banks out there. So deposits are increasing, customer counts increasing, revenues are obviously going way up for banks. All of this kind of flies in the face of what they've been saying in terms of anti-clarity. So maybe this is an opportunity for them to get into the game. I do want to play a clip, though, of Anthony Scaramucci, because this is a concern I have. Are we still at a position where we could still lose this in the last second or two? Because I know Mike Novagratz, he's kind of saying, hey, this might go through, But Scaramucci has a little bit of a different spin on this. Take a look.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. If you're doing something and your adversaries do not like what you're doing, then they look through your pick of the litter and they say, well, what does this guy really want? Oh, he wants the Clarity Act to pass. Oh, by the way, he's actually physically invested and it will monetarily benefit him if the Clarity Act passes. So he obviously wants it to pass. I'm his adversary. Let me do everything I can to block it from happening.
It's the bulk of his net
Well,
worth.
let's put it this way. You have a 927-page disclosure document. I think Obama's was like 9 pages. Trump's is 927 pages. So he hit you with a phone book, and you know, it's so egregious. It's sort of like almost wonderful in a weird way. You're like, oh my God, this guy just doesn't care.
All right, so to Scaramucci's point, this ethics situation, which has been the real line in the sand for really the last 6 months, he's kind of pointing on the fact that this could actually get a little ugly at the very end if, in fact, they don't get a final, concession on one side or the other. When you look at that, are you at all concerned? Are you still in the camp of this is going to go through with what Anthony said there?
Yeah, I'm still in the camp that this is going to go through. I think you have to look at the language that the White House sent up to the Senate for their ethics agreement. I mean, this is extraordinary to have a sitting president, say, I will be subject to ethics agreements based on one sector of the economy, one industry.
Right.
That's definitely, landmark as well. And you have a number of Democrats, again, who do want to get to yes. They've been kind of using ethics as to hold them back. But now they have language to react to. Now they have a proposal to react to. I think this is the first time they've really had anything to react to. And I do believe that they're able to redline this and get to a place where both Republicans and Democrats are going to be satisfied. I think there's a number of members on the Democrat side who really worry about what happens if this doesn't get done. Clarity brings a lot of customer protections to the table. And if there's another FTX-like incident, they don't want to get blamed for not getting Clarity done when Clarity could have prevented an FTX if it had been in place when FTX failed.
Yeah, well, I would agree. Not only the issue on consumer protection, but it's also a scenario now that we're facing a flight of innovation. I was just looking at this crazy list of number of projects that shut down or disappeared in 2026. Some of these, yes, guys, they should go away. But some of these are probably really good projects that are trying to build and innovate in this industry. And because of no clarity, essentially these companies were unable to basically hang on. And then you've got the stranglehold on the EU with what's happening in MiCA, only 300 firms over there approved. Do you think this will put more of a constraint on innovation in the US, or do you think this completely opens it up for opportunity for new businesses?
I think it opens it up, and it's not because they're somehow, free for all. This is going to put strict rules in place, put a federal regulatory framework in place. But I think it's the legal certainty that people need. There's a lot of great ideas out there, a lot of really, new innovation that we are seeing that could come on shore, but without that legal clarity, they're going to stay offshore and innovate overseas where they don't have to worry about a future SEC coming and saying, hey, you're offering unregistered securities. So it's the clarity, the legal clarity, the certainty that these innovators and developers need to fully be, on board with U.S. and make U.S. their home.
Well, I think the key here is going to be a lot of companies are going to, one, either decide to stay in the U.S. or we're going to start to see real innovation. I know several founders that have talked about this, about moving offshore, and they're in the midst of building a business. And so it is real. And I think the innovation side of it, plus just the consumer protection side, to me, that's the paramount issue here for new acquisition of crypto in general, because I think the adoption curve is going to leap forward dramatically once we get something like this in place. All right, so Trump is saying, senators, you're not going home until you get this done. You, of course, put up a Clarity for America website to tell the Senate to go ahead and get this done. What do they need to do? So for our listeners and viewers, what's the one thing they can do right now?
Yeah, we'd love for you to log on to Clarity for America and create a letter. We've made it very simple. It's just a couple clicks of the button, and the letter will be sent to your senators. And it's really important for them to get these individual letters. We've had over 1,000 sent over the weekend. In fact, it crashed our system for a little bit. We were able to get it back up and running. But this is how you make sure your voice is heard. These letters don't just go into the kind of universe. They actually are read by staff, and they're counted, and the staff tell the members, hey, we have X number of letters in support of this bill.
Yeah. Guys, I want you to stop everything you're doing right now. Just go over to Clarity for America, and whether you're a business or an individual, hit it, follow Summer's lead. I like the fact that you've kind of got the priorities that matter. Those all matter to me right there. So you can see these are big. And then I like this right here. You can go with different tones. The only problem is can we get we're pissed off tone? Can we get one of those? That would be a good one.
I mean, that's kind of passionate and heartfelt,
okay,
I guess.
I'm gonna stay at passionate and heartfelt then. But we need a pissed off mode there, because I think this needs to get done, obviously. So, hey, listen, Summer, we're definitely going to be watching this very closely. Things are getting very, very tight as we roll into it for next week. Hopefully this is going to come together. We'll love to get you back on the show to talk about where we go from here once this is done. But thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
If you like this video, hit like and subscribe, drop a comment down below, and also join our free private member group. The link is in the description.